Hi everyone, it's great to see you again. Happy New Year. This is our first live cast of the year. So Rena and me would like to wish you Happy New Year and welcome you to this new session. Today, we are talking to Jared, who's got heaps of experience in book writing. And when we met him, we thought it would be really good to invite him and let him share his expertise with us, because we know that many of our members are considering or already have started writing the books. So we thought it could be a topic of very much interest. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Ildiko Foots. I'm one of the co-founders of this group. And with Rena, I think we can celebrate our first year anniversary now, can't we?
Yeah,
very soon.
February.
Yeah,
Maybe we should think
very
of
soon.
Let's think, maybe a surprise party. Let's do that. Good
Yeah,
idea.
actually, that's a good idea. Anyway, so we'd love to welcome Jared. A little bit about him. He's the CEO of DreamSculpt Media Publishing, and he's, as I mentioned, he has a lot of experience in writing and publishing books. He has written many himself and co-authored even more. So without further ado, I think it would be best if Jared, you could introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about you, what you think is most useful for our coaches to hear and know about you to start with.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate being able to have a chance to connect with all of you coaches out there that are part of this community. It's a wonderful community. And, you know, I go back, you know, maybe like 20, 30 years and remember the kind of the origin of coaching in one of the first coaches institutes, and was wondering if this was really going to catch on. And my God, I mean, there are infinite amount of coaches. So we really love working with coaches for one reason, is we know that they need to have a distinction in what they're doing, and most likely it's going to be on their website, it's going to be on the materials, that perhaps their style or the particular focus or your whatever it is that you want to be known for as, you know, as a coach. So, you know, obviously a book would really make a difference. And why I love to be able to share and talk with coaches is because many times they make a few errors, and the errors are basically writing the book as this sort of like brochure to their practice. Many times it doesn't have the engaging storytelling, and it's just pretty much, you know, if it's a coach that's focused on, you know, discovering your purpose or whatever it may be, then that content is going to sort of follow with how they specifically work with their clients. So I started seeing that as I've been in touch with so many coaches over the years and helped quite a few develop and publish their books with us. And the one thing that that I know is really important is not only the distinction of what it is that specifically your coaching practice, but what is your story? What is your archetypical story? And that's a big one, because when we talk about, you know, an archetype, we're really talking about like what is it that you're that you've come here that's kind of your curriculum for your own personal growth. And that particular curriculum many times puts somebody in the place of being a coach. So if relationships is something you're really learning this lifetime and working on, then you may end up finding yourself as a relationship coach. So it's we obviously teach what we learn until we're so good and we've learned so much of what we were doing that we become pretty much a master and expert in helping other people. So that's how I see. So let's say you're a coach and you have a specific, it could be, you know, you're an executive coach in a particular direction, in leadership perhaps, and you're using principles that basically are very common. And if you're trained in a particular mode of coaching, and you know that's you're certified in that, you're going to be using that sort of lexicon of terms. So what happens a lot of times is it doesn't feel very distinctive. It just feels like we've seen it before. So that really is the challenge I have, is is not just to create a book, but to help you really see how the distinction really is how you can brand yourself. And let me just say that, and so that sounds like, well, the book will just be kind of part of your branding. So here's the second thing that I'd really love to share with you is the book needs to be a literary work. It needs to be something that people will value from a perspective of literature. The content in it, it will be very useful, obviously, for your clients as you're coaching your clients. But if it's not a client that you're coaching, the book needs to work, needs to have its own integrity and artistic value as a book. So I just want to share just the three things that I think are extremely important when I work with anyone, specifically in a nonfiction book. And that is, the first thing is storytelling. So many times, if you have didactic information that you want to share, you know, the 12 principles of public speaking or something like that, you're going to focus on what are those principles and putting them into the book. But you see, or that's kind of an easy, so what if it was the 10 principles of quantum physics? You know, people have a hard time digesting didactic information because they're thinking, and you know what I'm talking about, trying to figure out what you're saying. So storytelling is so important because that's how you create rapport with the reader. So regardless if it's the 12 steps to whatever it is, before you teach those steps and give them those actionable steps or giving them the knowledge and the wisdom, leading them into it is put them in a picture through storytelling. So your own personal storytelling. So, or it could be with clients, but I think that if you use this sort of old style of business books with case studies and such, it's still dry. If you are raw and you actually really, like, for instance, if it's a book on how to find your soulmate, instead of giving them just all the information, you know, go to the right spots to meet people, share your stories. And maybe share your story where you thought it was your soulmate and it turned out to be a dark night of the soul because you weren't listening to your heart or whatever. So take people into that first point is emotionally engaging storytelling. Storytelling that will pull on people's emotion and create rapport and trust with you as the author. And that is extremely important, that you're building trust with them, because it's like you're coaching them. While they're reading, they don't know you, but they have a relationship with you. So that's the first thing. The second thing that I think is extraordinarily important in this time and space where we are is make it socially relevant. So what do I mean by socially relevant? I mean that, for instance, I'm working with a client who wrote his book is I'm glad I had polio. I'm not quite sure if this is the right title. It's something like that. I'm glad I got polio. It's like, why would anyone write a book with that title? Well, he ended up healing himself or, you know, working with his handicap to such a degree that he ended up climbing Mount Kilimanjaro. He skied glaciers. And so there's a story there. So when I started working with him, we're producing a video. Obviously, what's going on now, regardless of your perspective on vaccinations, whatever, or pandemics, that was a pandemic. Many baby boomers remember that were old enough, and he was 4 years old when he had polio and was in the leg brace and had to suffer, you know, being made fun of and such. So that is so socially relevant because of what's going on now with COVID. It really brings that story to light. If you wrote that story 3 years ago, it may not be as interesting. Who cares about polio? But now we're remembering what it was like. So make it socially relevant. Even if you can take one aspect of your book, whatever, regardless of whatever, you know, let's say, because many of you are coaches and working with businesses and with executives and management and leadership, like what's going on now, you know, where people there's all this work related outages and, people not showing up due to COVID, or people not wanting to do their job anymore because they realize they haven't really been treated respectfully. So now they want to kind of start something new. So social relevance also is how we can help you get into the media. Obviously, that's one of the primary reasons is you're making a connection, but also you're making a connection with the media that says, oh, this is a good story. Perfect timing for a story about, somebody that had polio. So the third thing, so number one is emotionally engaging storytelling, and go for the rawness, and connect. And here's the third thing, which you probably already know, and that is making it relevant to the reader by putting them in the picture, by asking them questions, by the inquiry, by having them really do the self-investigation. But bring them into the picture, actually really speaking to them. I remember there was a book that I was taking a look at. Somebody I know was reading it, and so you take a look at this book. It was Jen Sinero's book, Badass, one of the badass books. You're badass at making money or whatever. And the way in which she writes is, and it's obviously exclusively for women, it's just like, what I'm talking about, girlfriend, like, bring the reader into the picture, don't do it, people that go purely didactic and it's just all the information. This is one thing that's happening is we have information overload. So if it's a purely didactic book and all knowledge and information and no storytelling, then the retention is going to be really less than if you really bring them in through the storytelling. Now, don't overwhelm with the storytelling. Use it as a tool to create that engagement, to create the curiosity for people to do their own self-inquiry. So I would say, once again, bring socially relevant, emotionally engaging storytelling, and self-inquiry is really important, that it brings the reader to self-investigation in some way, where they can see themselves in the picture, or you're actually giving them methods and approaches. And I just want to add one last thing to that is, don't turn it into a workbook. It's extremely important, once again, I go back to my original thought, that the book is a literary work. There was a very famous book, and maybe some of you have read it, Who Moved My Cheese by Spencer Johnson. I think it sold 38 million copies. It was a 93-page book, barely enough weight to put the title of the book on the spine that you could even read it. If it's in the stacks of books, it's so thin, and it did so well because it had humor, it touched people, and it was simple. So it's, once again, if you're doing research in this specific area and your target market is more people that are going to be researching, then it's different. But I would say, in this respect, balance the knowledge, the wisdom with the storytelling and the self-inquiry.
Jared, thank you so much for sharing. There's definitely so much wisdom in everything that you shared so far. Perhaps we could just take a step back, and I see we have comments that kind of align with what I was going to ask. So some of our viewers, they're asking, well, probably a coach, he or she would not really go for a literary masterpiece right away. Perhaps just starting out with a little ebook is perhaps the next step for many of us. It's good for us to dream that maybe eventually we could write out our life story. But maybe for many of us, it's just, can we just create a little opt-in something to give out, so that to serve the purpose of maybe getting some email addresses and such, and subscribers. So what do you see is the difference?
This is a really good question.
Yeah.
It's a good question, because it's actually what most people are doing, is they're creating, it could be a very small ebook, but basically what it is what we would consider in the industry a loss leader. And with the loss leader book, and this is my perspective, and I'm not saying you do need to give up books, and it is really important, and I give up books all the time. I have the book that I wrote in 2006, The Flip, was an award-winning book. We sold quite a few copies, and at the end of the run, there was still several hundred books left years later and so we bought back the rights, and I got back a box of about 100 books or 200 books, and I always have like a dozen books in the trunk of my car. Never who you're going to meet. So yeah, absolutely. But you see, don't write the book that way, because that's what happens is so if it's a very, very short book and it's an ebook, which you can do in an ebook, it could be more of something like it does work if it's just a piece of a program. If you get somebody in the program and they're here, because what's the book? It's just knowledge and information, in a linear sequential order where you're turning pages, as opposed to a website where you're scrolling and clicking. Although with ebooks you're scrolling and clicking anyway, in a way. So the reason why I'm saying I'm actually feeling like that, develop the book in such a way that there could be something that precedes it that is the giveaway, but really think of it as a book that's a full book and that is a literary work. And when you said about your story, no, it's not it doesn't have to be a memoir, because that wouldn't actually really work if you're actually giving people tools and but it's the integration of both. And yes, it could be a shorter book, it could start out as an ebook, but the way we work with our clients is I really look towards this being that book that really will be a big impact beyond just the clients you have. Did that answer the question?
Yes. Let us know, those of you who are watching us live, if you have any questions, please keep dropping them in the chat. We'll be picking them up as we go. I guess one question that I have here, we've been part of this coaching community for a long, long time. And what we see time after time is that perhaps people feel not as confident that their story matters. And I always say that I am the most interesting book that I'll ever read. And I encourage everybody to do the same, to really explore their own inner world and look under all those little rocks and hurt feelings and whatever is happening. Because many of us do coach around emotional and family and relationship, not just corporate. So a lot of our own story, personal experience does come in. So yeah, I agree, it doesn't have to become a memoir, especially if we're not that famous yet. We haven't really accomplished the big things that I'm sure is our potential. But what advice would you give to someone who really feels like there's nothing interesting about me? How could I ever dare writing about something like that? Nobody will ever buy it. It would be not interesting. So what are your thoughts around it? I'm sure you're working with all kinds of people. So,
well, you see, this is the place I come from. I come from a place that the passions and the reason why you're probably a coach, and I guess I can call myself a coach. I was a therapist for over 12 years, and I worked in hospitals, and I worked with executives and all over the world, from executives in Australia and here and such. And how I really got into this and what really excited me is I'm an artist, and I really see that that everybody has a very unique and distinct expression and that wants to come out. So it's actually it's a healing process, or I don't necessarily healing as much, but it's a self-growth and awakening process, just writing the book, because once you start putting these thoughts down and putting into a structure. So I would say that, you don't know how it's going to end up. And the way I work with people is if it's raw materials, I'm going to say one thing, this is what I've seen. I've seen both people that have no idea how awesome their writing is and their story and how impactful the story is going to be for others. But they don't know how to structure it. They don't know how to present it. Then I see people that are really good at branding and really good, at sort of marketing, but it doesn't feel very distinct once you get into the content. But they have a very distinct presentation. So I would say, just even if your presentation is not great or you don't have the right title or whatever it is, get into the process of writing it. And how we work, with authors in development really is to create that structure first, and then you fill the structure. And so that's primarily how how we work with clients. And the structure meaning, what are the chapters? What's the flow? Where do you want to take somebody on the journey? And then what are the steps on the journey? And those steps become, the big steps are chapters, and the small steps are subheads within that chapter. I don't think I answered your question, but it's helpful, hopefully. Did I answer your question? I did. Okay.
She keeps nodding. She keeps nodding.
Yeah,
So
I mean, it's a process that unravels things that you don't even know. So in your story, so in your storytelling, every coach I know uses their own personal storytelling. I mean, is that correct? I mean, how can you not? Because that's what you're doing. Is you've learned. I mean, I coached my daughter on how to hold a fork. Because she never held a fork before. And so you're probably coaching people how to do how to present something, or how to, how to bring their business out, or whatever it is. And what are they feeling? They're feeling fear. Everyone feels fear when you're stepping out. So I think this is really, it's a good thing to feel that fear right now, and have those thoughts of like, why would anyone want to read my book? And then think about that. Why would anyone, this is just like, why wouldn't anyone want the knowledge and wisdom? And if you don't feel you have that knowledge and wisdom, then why are you coaching in the first place? You're coaching because you have the knowledge and wisdom, and you want to share it so people can be more effective in what they're doing, right?
I love that. I love that view. And as you rightly say, the fear is so strong. Fear about showing our real vulnerability. But I think we all have to do, as Rena mentioned earlier, the inner work for us to also come over those fears so we can help others even more powerfully. You mentioned earlier your background in therapy. So I would love to know, we would love to know how that led you to writing books. And we also know that you've been called the book whisperer. So how does it help you? How does your background help you in writing and publishing books?
That's a really good question, because I can put the pieces together in my head as I'm talking. I started out as an artist, really, seriously. I mean, I went to Boston University in the School of Fine Arts, and like, I'm not into that crap. And I moved to New York and went to the School of Visual Arts and was engaged in the art world in Soho of the 70s. And literally, I mean, Warhol, I knew all these people. And I finally had to get the heck out of there, because it felt like it wasn't really what my truth was. That's when I got my master's degree and I became a therapist, because I wanted to give back. And in that process, really what I started seeing is that everyone has a story. And so as an expressive therapist, so that sort of led me to working a lot with children things, and emotional intelligence was something that came to me very early on. In the 90s, I met, I had lunch with one of the authors of Executive EQ, who also actually had produced a series of books on for children and teaching them emotional literacy. So one thing led to another, and we started a company. I started a children's emotional literacy project, and we had people like Norman Lear and the mayor of Los Angeles, and everything just kept pushing and moving towards the book whisperer part. Is actually the fact that actually that came from our marketing person was reading somebody's I guess expression about working with me, and mentioned that Jared's this book whisperer. And I think I've always been very intuitive, and I can kind of tune into people's energy and feeling and sensation. I actually taught energy work healing in even in with executives back 20 or 30 years ago. So so a lot of things that have led to so where I'm at now, and how I really believe what I'm doing, is what's really on my path is a little bit of everything. So when I work with somebody, I can kind of feel the book that they were meant to write. It's like sitting in them, because it's their I'm using the term curriculum. I hope I don't get too spiritual here, but it is why we're here. We have a curriculum. So if part of your curriculum is to learn, how to respect and love and be kind to each other, you know, maybe you married somebody that was unkind and was abusive, and now there's a whole story around that. So, and that's when we tell our story, it's healing, but it also it's collective. Because how many other people have been through, you know, abusive relations? How many people? So that's I think what really turns me on is everything that I've done has brought me to this place now, and as well as, you know, with media as well, because I see that a book is, you know, I go back to my original comment that, you know, make it a literary work. Don't just make it, you know, a loss leader, like, you know, oh, here's the techniques I use in my coaching practice. Now it's a book. Make it a literary work, because it will be a really amazing experience for you, and people will feel it. What you put into it is what they get out of it. I don't know if I answered that question and went around sideways, but I the therapy part, actually, what that really was that was about, dude, compassion and empathy really is why we're all here. And I've worked with people, I mean, from the criminally insane that are murdered to, you know, children that have so many challenges that, you know, their curriculum was pretty full when they came into this lifetime.
Sorry, just trying to find the unmute button. Thanks a lot. I love that. And it's really great to see that our listeners are enjoying the chats. Guys, again, if you have any questions, put them in the chat for us, and then we can ask it for you, or we can, you know,
or comments or dialogue. I mean, I love that. If there's something that I said that we want to share that is relative.
Sorry, I just lost my thread of thoughts. Yes, I had a question about, okay, we have written the book, and the next step is around, you know, there's a lot of steps, but what about positioning yourself and the book as well on the market?
Well, that is obviously the biggest issue, is how do you position yourself? And one of the things that I find really interesting is the process, and I do this with my clients, and this is something you all can do, you should do before you're even thinking about writing a book, and that is who you're writing it to. So I'll share it right here. You know, a bit of a process is, you know, close your eyes, go, not necessarily now, but when you have the time, go deep within, and imagine who you're writing it to. Imagine you're at a book signing event, and who's in the room? How old are they? What, are there more women than men usually? And so if you, in your imagination, you see it's a room of 75% women, and the median age is between 26 and 62, something like that, then you know it's like middle age, like maybe 30s, 40s, you know, early 40s. And so now you actually imagine a woman that's maybe 42 years old, and her name is Joan. And Joan asks you, why'd you write the book? And you ask Joan, you know, why'd you come to the book signing? And you follow Joan out, and you see that, you know, she's driving a Toyota Prius, and you follow her, and she goes to Whole Foods and buys organic. You know what, you want to actually wrap your mind around one person. That's your avatar reader, and that's Joan. And you're writing the book to Joan, because there's probably a million Joans. And that's, so as far as positioning, that's the first thing to do. Then you know who your, let's say, demographic, psychographic, you know, mindset of that reader is. And that's when the messaging is going to, we use media, we are DreamSculpt Books and Media, because 80% of all books right now are sold on Amazon. Brick and mortar bookstores are not the place anymore where books are sold, unfortunately. So how do you engage with somebody? What the good news is, you can't engage with the video unless it's on a display, and, you know, in the store, you know, which is, you know, you probably had a multi-million-dollar or multi-billion-dollar media company behind you. But video is how you access people, and the 80% on, you know, on social media. So we do that as well, because we figure, like, in 30 seconds, if you can actually make an emotionally engaging, socially relevant, bring that person into that experience and create the curiosity factor, they'll click. And I'll leave you with this: is you want to build a community more than find customers to buy a book. And you know that because this is about building a community. So your positioning strategy really is based on your avatar reader, and then where do they hang out, and how to access them in the communities of interest. That answer that one?
Yes, thanks a lot. Are there any myths, and if there are, what are they around writing a book that you could debunk now that you think you could help other coaches
about writing a book? Well, the myth number one is that it's a linear process. And I'm going to tell you why we do what we do. I'll say me as a coach working in book development. One of the things that that people get really kind of whacked out about is, will I be judged? And I think that's, am I exposing too much of who I am? And that's probably, the myth is no, that the more raw, the better. The more people think that you're real and really want to connect because they're having a real experience with you. So that's one of the myths, I think. But the myth more in the business sense is, well, I'm sorry, what I was actually about to say is linear. The linear process, that is really a myth, that's how you write a book. That you start with chapter 1, and you go to chapter 2 and chapter 3, because many times it doesn't work. So what happens is you say, okay, I'm going to start writing the book. And you start writing, you're in linear, right? You start writing chapter 1, and it's just not there. And you just kind of come back to chapter 1, and now you're onto chapter 2. So how I work and how we work when I work with a client, whether we do in a group process or work with them solo, which is what I prefer, is because we can really get this thing down, is to actually look at the total experience that you want to create. And we're talking about a nonfiction book now. It's very different, obviously, if it's a fiction book. You know, we have an arc of the story and such. So we look at that and we say, okay, you want to write a book, obviously, we'll let's say on fruit, okay? And you have no idea, you know, you grew up on a farm and you had fruit trees. You know, you start writing about that, and that's the first chapter. And now you're kind of lost, you don't know where to go. So what we would do rather is say, okay, so how do we get, what's the first chapter? Let's say, what's the first and the last? Let's bookend it. The first one is going to be something that's going to engage them. You're not just talking about the antioxidants in blueberries. You're starting out and you're telling them about when you at grandma's farm or whatever. So they now, oh, wow, that's really cool, you know, and they have a real experience with you. Okay, so where do you want to lead them? The last chapter is going to be the miracle of fruit and how wonderful and how all fruit is wonderful. So each chapter is on different fruit groups. So maybe you say, okay, I want to go from large to small. So after that first chapter about grandma's farm, the first chapter is on berries because they're the smallest fruits. And then the last chapter will be on melons because they could be the largest fruit, right? So let's just you have a chapter on citrus fruit. And you want to write about all the different citrus fruits. So, you know, there's oranges, grapefruits, there's lemons, there's limes. So what we're doing is we're taking that chapter, we're writing, that's chapter 3, citrus fruits. And now we go and we put subheads. We put grapefruits, oranges. So once you see the entire holistic experience of what the book is, now you can come in and you can actually even work a little bit in each chapter. Maybe there's 7 chapters, and in every chapter, there's a story that precedes it. There's a story and the chapter on berries, about how you made blueberry pie with your mom. Drop that in. Now the next one on citrus is how you made fresh squeezed orange juice and sold it, you know, on your driveway. You know, and now you've actually put a little story into each one of them. So you see what I'm saying? It's a holistic development of it, because what's really going to matter is actually as it develops, you start knitting everything together. And the subheads, like in that chapter on citrus, are really important because maybe you wrote something about oranges, about the vitamin C, and you can copy and paste and dump it into that bucket. So it starts developing, and then it starts knitting together. It starts fusing together because every time you go back in, you rewrite or you add new content, and it becomes eventually a whole book. And that's the approach I've been working with. I've had clients that have been working on their book for well over a year, some into 2 years. Using this approach, I had one client that she actually wrote probably like maybe 70,000, which is like, maybe 150, 160, maybe 170 page book in less than 6 months. And don't take any course that says write a book overnight. It's not overnight. That's the shortest period of time that I've in any of the clients I've had. Any questions relative to that? Oh, I can't hear you. You're on mute.
I'm having trouble just finding my unmute button here. I'm just checking the chat to see if we have any questions.
Can I ask him something, Ildiko? He's so psychic. I was just getting ready to type about, what about those lock yourself into a hotel and write your book in 24 hours or a weekend? Because you hear about that all the time.
Oh, it's got to be a good hotel, I'm telling you. Only a 5-star hotel does that work, because you can have good food during the 24 hours, right? You need the nutrition. No. Okay, so that actually could be a really, really powerful way to download. Like do a retreat, like download. You see, the structure that I'm talking about is something that's very methodical, that sets a structure to do the download. You can go either way. I mean, you can take a weekend retreat and just what's called write down the bones. There's a wonderful book by Natalie Goldberg. Probably about 30 years ago, I was living in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and I did a workshop with her. Maybe it was more than 30 years ago. And we went into the aspen trees up in the mountains in Santa Fe. And she gave us an hour. And back then, there was no computers. You have your journal and you have your pen. And she said, do not lift your pen for 1 hour, for 1 second. And that's what it's called writing down the bones. Your hand really hurts afterwards, but you don't know what comes out. So these kinds of things are really good to but the structure is number one for me. And if you've already done something like that and have all this content, then you can see how it fits into the structure. But I think that's because what happens many times, if you read that, if I read what I wrote, it would be very personal, but it would be incoherent but in that there could be some of the greatest wisdom. I may have brought in like the most important wisdom I've ever brought into my life. So you have to kind of, come in there and then sort of extrapolate from that what would constitute a book.
What is, in your opinion, what would make, in your opinion, a groundbreaking book?
Well, this is a really, really good question, because this is what I do. I'm really basically the guy that's here to say, let's make it groundbreaking. And how do you do that? There's an angle to everything. I guess, but tooting my own horn is titles come to me all the time. I mean, one of the best titles, she's not ready to write the book. It's just, I'm talking with someone and she's talking about the chaos in her life. And then she's like, there's a miracle there. And I look at her, that's the book recipe, like The Miracle of Chaos, here's your title. So, but somebody comes to me and they have a title that, like, for instance, resilience in the workplace. Well, that sounds like an email you get from HR, So what did that book turn into? The Slinky Effect. Why? Because you own the Slinky Effect. You can't own resilience in the workplace. It's a common thing. But when you call it the Slinky Effect, it's, oh, Slinky's a toy. I actually got the toy manufacturer to let us use the trademark there on the cover and the book title. But it gives you the positioning, and so that's one of the things that I really focus on. One of the authors I'm working with now, her book is titled The Mindset Prison. And why I think that's a really powerful, dimension is because she can build this out and create, or whether the Slinky Effect training program, the Mindset Prism series of podcasts. So you want it well branded and that you own it, that it really feels like, and so one of the things that you have to do then is when you get a really good title, many times when I'm working with my client, it just comes in, it's like, oh, the Mindset Prism, let's check Amazon. And you check Amazon and my God, there's no other title. I had somebody else and they had a really great title and I was suspect. It was like, this is the title. And I said, have you checked Amazon? And I went to Amazon, there were like 4 books with the same title, different subtitles, but that doesn't work. You want the title and the subtitle.
I guess my other question would be, over the years, I used to be also such a private person. I barely was posting any pictures of myself. I have everything kind of like only for my friends, and only my friends can follow me on Instagram, and being very, very private. And I must say, ever since I became a coach, I think if I really want to be successful, living behind closed doors and hiding all your goodies is really, it's going to make your life very, very difficult when it comes to getting clients. And so I've been kind of like much more outspoken about my life, who I am, and showing who I am and being vulnerable. And I must say it's been quite liberating in many, many ways. That you can just say things and you're like, oh, I didn't die. People know this now. It's out in the world, and I didn't die. And I feel like what you were saying about compelling storytelling and such, it's probably going to take us even a step farther to really kind of like put ourselves out there, our story out there, our life, our emotions, feelings, challenges, mistakes, just our hero's journey. Right.
Absolutely.
And so I feel like for me, really definitely writing a book might be the next step. So what advice do you have for people who perhaps don't see the value yet and in actually showing the real self, or perhaps are still confused about who their real selves are? And do you have any tools, techniques, that some sort of a homework that you could give to people to say, okay, do this for a month, come back, and you'd be in a better place to write a book?
Well, the good news is, and it's a little over a week, on February 3rd, Thursday at 8 a.m. Not Thursday, we're Friday. We moved it to Friday, so it's not, we'll send you the information. I'll have a 2-hour workshop that's complimentary, free, however you want to term it, to give you those tools. But I can tell you right now, a couple of things that I mentioned. One was like who you're writing it to. This is the one tool that I think it's a really good preparation, even if you come back, and hopefully you will, on the 3rd and experience a 2-hour workshop. If you're a little bit more prepared, it's going to make a difference. So this is the thing to do, is to really focus on who you're writing the book to. And I think I give you the exercise, but since we have a few minutes, let's do it a little bit more to embody. So close your eyes for a moment. Take a deep breath and let go with the exhale. Let go of all expectations. And those of you that are saying, well, why would I do this? Why am I? It does, to get the whys out, just be open and just be present. And once you feel that sense of relaxation, feel what it would be like if you actually had the book out. It's out there already, okay? And what does that feel like? And now imagine that you're at an event. It could be a book signing event. You could be one of the speakers at a conference, but feel what it would be like to really stand behind this book. And then imagine who's in the space. And as I said, you can do this exercise where you just imagine right now how many people are in the space. And let's just do that for a moment and feel what it feels like. If you're the one that says there's 10 people in the space and I'm shaking, you have some work to do. If you're the person that says you're in a stadium, well, maybe you're getting a little overwhelmed. But just imagine you're in like a hotel, conference room, maybe a book signing in a store, but get a sense of the group, of the number of people and your comfort level, and then divide the space between male and female. How many men, how many women? Once you have that percentage, let's say it's 70% women or whatever it may be, now you know you want to look for a woman being your avatar reader, but you want to get a sense of the age. So you look at this audience, you get a sense, what's the median age? There's some young people, there's some older people, but generally, let's say people are the middle age, like maybe 40s, 50s. So now, whatever comes to you in this moment, that person, whether it's a male or a female, whatever worked for you, the age that you feel is like the median age that sort of represents your primary reader. Now, I'm going to do one thing, and you could write this down. And in the workshop, I'm going to do the second part to it, but there is no time to do that now. So the one thing that you can write down is, imagine, go back to that, find out who the person's name is, give her or him a name, and have this person ask you one question. And the question is, why did you write this book? So when you finish this, close your eyes, go back, see who that person is. Imagine that person asking you, let's say it's at a book signing and person's come up with the book, you're signing it, and says, why'd you write this book? I'm just curious. And write that down. And you'll be surprised. If you're on this call and listening to it, it's inside of you. Now the question is, how do we bring it out? You can work with me. I don't pull it out, but it does come out. It works. It does, because it's inside of you. And so you can just be peaceful with that.
Thank you. This was wonderful. I actually had a couple of answers. Why did I write it? And I see my book has become so much bigger than I thought. Right away, it's kind of like, oh, I have a million reasons. Yes. I guess I have one question
Sure.
here. Is many people in our community, such as myself as well, I'm not an English native speaker. If I chose to write a book, it would be definitely in English. So do you work with non-native speakers, and what advice do you have for them?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
They're
No.
also insecure about their not me.
Whatever your primary language is. English obviously is probably you're going to want an English translation if you're living in a foreign country and you specifically want to keep it in that language of your country. But I would say that it's pretty easy these days with translations and such, with software. So you do want, I would say English and Spanish.
I actually meant writing in English, just
yes,
using English as the main language, because most of our clients perhaps they are spread out worldwide, and so that everyone can actually access that content right away, and we don't have to pay more money. And I'm sure many would choose writing in their native language just because the English is not that good, but many might choose to just go for English. So do you work with people like that, and what has been
of course everything? So basically, expanded distribution of ebooks is across all these platforms, not just on Kindle, and all over the world. There are specific ones that are more oriented towards Spanish language. Obviously that's pretty big because of all Latin America. So there's why don't I add this to the equation, because people are probably saying, well, how do you even publish or anything like that, to kind of create the fullness of the picture. If anyone listening to this is interested, just get in touch, with Rena. We're going to be doing this on the 3rd, and you're all invited. B, I really like the idea of
it's going to be on the 4th.
Within this community. The 4th, I'm sorry, the 4th. I keep within this community. That will be an incredible thing, that we're supportive. We're using this community. And I see how that can be really, really powerful. So working with us and as a strategic partnership. with this community, with your community. So I'm really excited to be. So the question is going to be like, what do you do beyond the development of the book? Do you publish? How do you publish and such? So I'll just add that to the equation here. It's for people trying to figure that out. So DreamSculpt, my company, is an imprint of a world-class literary agency that's now a publisher, which is really interesting. So Bill Gladstone, who I've known for several decades, who's my literary agent for the books that I've had published, is really a legend in the business. He started Waterside in the 80s, and there's a book or a series that he got off the ground as an agent called the Dummies series, which probably is one of the most successful publishing ventures, along with Chicken Soup of the Soul, which Jack Canfield's not only a client, but a friend of Bill. We've worked all together. So there's really great people in the Waterside family. Eckhart Tolle, who wrote Power of Now, Bill Gladstone's his agent. So it's a really good place to be. But here's how we do it, is once we develop a book, you have the contract with Waterside. The book will say DreamSculpt on it. It'll be published both as an ebook and a print book. If we can get books off the ground, and we have a special relationship with Amazon that came to Waterside so we can work together. If things go well and we can get a book off the ground, we also have the potential and the possibility of doing a full run of books and getting bookstore distribution. So we're really a hybrid model. The bookstore distribution is really edgy these days and really hard. And so it's not really something I push, because you would have to actually do a full run of books. It would work if anyone sold a significant amount of books, let's say in a month or two, because you could take those royalties, roll it over, do the run of books. So there's much more we can do because we're working, really with some of the leaders in the industry. And we also have incredible marketing partners to do things like video embedded press releases. Our last one was a psychiatrist wrote this book. It got over 400 pickups by major media outlets. So, there's no promise of anything. It's really hard. Many people write books and never see a cent, especially with self-publishing. I don't think I would say there's other ways to make money. It's not like the get rich quick scheme, but I could tell you, if you're a coach, it's going to really make a difference in your practice, especially if it's a good book and it gets out there. You'll see the financial reward in your coaching clients. Anything else?
Yes, I have a question that is related to exactly that. So while I'm listening to you, I'm thinking, yes, we could write a book, but if we write a book, we want to make sure we write a book that will be read and will be a New York Times bestseller list and whatever. And looking at various different posts and different coaches and other people talking about their work, and one of the first things you see on their post is New York Times bestseller or #1 on whatever list.
Yeah.
Do you have any insight? I
can make everyone a #1 Amazon.
Nowadays, what makes a book successful?
Yeah.
What gets bored? What gets on those bestsellers?
It's a great question. Okay, so let's go to the New York Times bestseller. It's literally like saying your book could be a New York Times bestseller is basically saying any one of you could be the next Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk, because they're just people, right? And they were in the right place, the right time. So of course anyone, but it's really, 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 really hard to get onto the New York Times bestseller list. There's so much that has to happen, but last week we did a bestseller campaign and 3 of our books became #1 Amazon #1 bestsellers. So to create an Amazon #1 bestseller, it doesn't take much, and it's a little bit of a game. We do it because it does make a difference for the author when it's printed on the book. But I think your question is asking is like, how does something get to that place? There's a serendipity factor. The right place at the right time, but the biggest factor really is it's an incredible work, and you've done everything, and you've have the right alignment of support and strategic partnerships. You know, so to want it to be a number one, a New York Times bestseller, have the aspiration, see it, visualize it, but at the same time, answering your questions like, how do you know it's successful? I'm gonna answer that question. That maybe that's the final place where we leave. You know it's successful when you get an email from someone that says, "Thank you so much. Your book has changed my life." You're a successful author. That's it. Because maybe that person will change 100,000 people's lives.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much for all your wisdom, for sharing with us, for being with us. I guess the last question is, how can people connect with you?
Well, I would say this, because we are in a strategic partnership with you, they can connect with me directly. I mean, I'm totally fine taking emails if you want to direct my email. I could put it on the chat, but very simply, I'm Jared Rosen, JaredRosen at mac.com, mac.com. But I would say for all of you listening, if you can make it, this is going to be we're going to have a powerful 2-hour, it doesn't cost anything, but it will give you great wealth of knowledge. And if those of you who can't make that or just would rather work, independently with me, ready to do that, get in touch with Rena as well, because once again, we're strategic partnership. So we're all in the same community here. Our communities are together on this one.
Wonderful. I really enjoyed this conversation with you. I'm just mindful of time, so we're going to stop recording. And those of you who are live with us on Zoom, if you would have more questions and would like to stay on and ask Jared a couple of more questions offline, please do. And everyone who's been watching us on Facebook or who's going to be watching the replay in the future, thank you so much for being here. Leave some comments. I'm sure Jared is going to engage with you also on Facebook. And do join us on February the 4th, Friday, at what was the time again? 10?
It will be 8 a.m.
8 a.m.
Pacific, 11 a.m. Eastern.
Yeah, it's going to be 2 hours long. There won't be any recording. Maybe let's see. But try to be live there. I think you're really gonna get the best benefits if you actually join us live.
It really will make a difference live
there
of that. Yes.
As well. So let's have fun. Join us. I can't wait. So thank you so much. Bye. Enjoy 2022. Okay, I'm gonna stop recording here.